Hiya, I'm Mocha, and this is Stories from Before. It's funny how sometimes we choose the thing that looks pretty over the thing we really need. I believe there is an old saying that goes, "Not all that glitters is gold." And that saying always gets me thinking. I say, looks aren't everything, but they help. That aside, tonight's tale takes us far away into the realm of fantasy. So sit back and relax while your girl regales you with tales of old. Hush now, it's beginning. Long ago, in lands lush and green, there lived a mighty dragon. He was big, strong, and beautiful, as all such creatures were meant to be. Let's call him Killigan. Killigan was a mighty lord, a king of many lands. None could challenge him, and thus he ruled for many, many years. Yet, with the years, all creatures grow tired of loneliness and solitude. In his adulthood, Killigan began to long for a wife. As a king of all things, it was only natural that he should have the most beautiful wife of them all. Being the mighty creature he was, Killigan brought before him all the human kings in his lands, and he rumbled, "I am king, and I desire a wife. Bring me your daughters, and I shall choose one among them to be my queen of all things." Such a very pushy king, isn't he? Not that you don't expect that from dragons, but still, bring me your daughters? Oh, please, wouldn't hurt. At first, the kings of men were hesitant and afraid. How could a human woman love a dragon? How could a dragon have a family with a human? To assuage these doubts and fears, the mighty dragon took on the form of a human man, tall and handsome, but with the strength and speed of 100 men. No king could deny that he was indeed handsome, and his power would raise their own status. Yet still, they hesitated. Killigan wanted a wife who could love him and share in his long life fortune, and so he brought forth all the wealth of his hoard. He laid it out and told the kings, "My wife and her kingdom shall share in my fortune." And the hesitant kings were seduced by his gold and agreed to bring their daughters in spite of all the fear and hesitation. The human lords could not deny Killigan and praised him for his wisdom and benevolence as they left him, each returning to him with their daughters for him to marry. They sound like a bunch of greedy stuck-ups to me. Of the many princesses brought before him, 2 in particular stood out to the mighty dragon. One was a curly-haired beauty. Her looks and wiles beguiled the dragon, and before all other things, he wanted her. But he was no fool. Killigan had to wait and see if she was the best pick for him. The next princess had long hair the color of raven wings, and though she did not speak to him overmuch, the mighty dragon could see her admiration for him in her eyes. That sounds intense. Maybe she's got a thing for dragons. Wouldn't be the first girl I met who liked him big and scaly. You get him, girl. The mighty dragon, who desired to be wed to someone who could love him for his own looks, stood before all of the princesses in his true form, a towering beast of legend that dwarfed hills and mountains. Many of his potential wives fled, shrieking and howling in terror. Rude. Super rude. That's downright ugly behavior. I can't believe these girls. Well, let's see who stuck around. Yet the two princesses whom he had an eye on did not flee upon seeing his visage. They both stood in the face of his might. The princess in curls, we'll call her Tilly. Tilly scowled at the dragon, unafraid of him. He was disappointed to see such scorn, but he admired her bravery. The raven-haired beauty still gazed on with love in her eyes, unafraid of Killigan's strength and power. Oh, I like her. We'll call her Dorian. Killigan's heart was warmed by Dorian's admiration. To Tilly, Dorian, and their families, he bade them stay with him a while longer, so that he could choose between them who would be his wife. Them aside, he told all the other kings that their daughters had failed and banished them from his sight. The kings skulked away, chastising their daughters for their cowardice and lamenting the loss of such wealth. The other kings were overjoyed, filled with pride that their daughters had made such an impression on Killigan. They praised their daughters, and the father of the raven-haired princess congratulated his competitor on their success. Killigan looked down at his two potential wives and tried his best to decide how next to test their worth. Considering his desires, he came to the conclusion that any wife of his simply must be a talented individual. With this thought in mind, he demanded that both women show him the fruits of their talent. Tilly immediately began to dance, showing off the agility of her own body as she swirled before Killigan. The dragon was pleased with her willingness, though her skill lacked refinement. Her beauty fulfilled the hunger of his eyes, and he longed for her. Killigan seems to be the type to be easily taken by a pretty face, don't you think? Yet, before she was left behind, Dorian did protest. "My lord, if you wish to see the value of our talents, would it not be best to give us some time to show them to you?" Killigan, smitten as he was becoming, was still a wise dragon. Recognizing the wisdom of her words, the great dragon turned to Dorian and nodded. "You may have a single day. Go from here and return with proof of your own skill. Prove to me your worthiness as potential wives," he commanded. And so they went, Tilly to her home and the wise Dorian to work. The next day, at the high sun, the princesses and their fathers returned to the home of the great dragon. Tilly brought herself, dressed exquisitely. She seemed prepared to entertain Killigan with yet another dance. Dorian brought with her a great, beautiful bracer made of silver and jade from foreign lands. She brought trays of food she had worked through the night to prepare. She stood before the great and mighty dragon in a dress of her own making. Oh, that's smart. Big points for bringing something you made yourself. Killigan was impressed with them both, and so he bade them show off their talents. Tilly, unburdened with gifts and items, began to dance for the dragon. She twirled and dipped, her garb showing off her body and further entrancing the great dragon. By the time she chose to stop, his desire for her was stifling. He barely had the patience to treat the pair fairly and see what Dorian had brought him. Yet when he turned to her, she presented him with a feast all gruelingly cooked and overseen by her. Generous as he was, the dragon took on the form of a human, and he broke his fast with the kings and their daughters, tasting the bounty that Dorian had prepared for him. When he had taken his fill and thoroughly sated his own hunger in spite of his true size, Dorian presented him with the beautiful bangle, begging him to wear the piece as a gift from her and a token of her affection. The dragon was skeptical at first, but he placed on the magnificent jewelry all the same, thinking that he would simply add it to his hoard one day. The raven-haired woman was overjoyed that he had worn her bangle and twirled away from him in her dress, showing off the craftsmanship and skill of her work as the dress shifted with her and swirled. Once she had his attention, the woman sang a ballad of love to Killigan, professing to the great king that she did indeed adore him. Killigan was taken aback by her boldness, her simple but kind beauty, and her dedication to him. When, in his head, the time came to decide, Killigan was stuck. Tilly was so beautiful. She entranced him and made him desire her. And yet, Dorian was affectionate to him. She desired him and his happiness. She doted upon him, which was something he had never experienced. Looking between them both, it took him forever to make his decision between them. It took so long, in fact, that finally, short of patience, Tilly smacked him and bade him make up his mind. Killigan was appalled at her and impressed with her strength of will. No human had ever dared strike him or tell him what to do. Deciding that this quality made Tilly even more attractive to him, he made up his mind. Killigan chose to be wed to Tilly. You're lost, big guy. More Dorian for me. While Dorian was distraught and hurt by his decision, she accepted his choice with the elegance and poise of true nobility. She and her father wished Killigan and Tilly the best and left them be. The princess and the dragon were wed on the next blue moon. Theirs was a splendid affair, and every noble person in the land showed up to honor the great beasts on his date of marriage. At their wedding, Dorian and her family showered them both with gifts, more so than any other. While Killigan appreciated her gifts and the well wishes, her kindness to him after being spurned made him feel guilty. He had not removed her bangle. The gift had grown on him, and over the weeks between his meeting Tilly and rejecting Dorian, he had not thrown it into the hoard. On the night of his wedding, he approached Dorian, taking the bangle off and offering it back to her. Dorian shook her head, refusing his return of her gift. It was a gift given freely to the man I adored. There is no higher honor you could do me than to keep it and wear it, she insisted. Hearing her words, he kept the bangle, wearing the beautiful piece proudly. His wedding with Tilly went off without a hitch. Over the next few months, Killigan tried to grow closer to his new wife. He was affectionate to her, yet she always scowled at him and told him to leave her be. When he asked her to cook for him, she could not, insisting that he use their servants instead. While he was with her, the mighty dragon slowly became sad, restless, and unsatisfied. Oof, this sounds rough, Killy. Bet you're wishing you picked Dory, aren't ya? I sure do hope things look up soon, teasing aside. In the end, it was only a year later when Tilly left Killigan. Guess not. left Killigan after he flew into an explosive rage, fearing his power and anger and naming him a mindless, violent monster. When next the dragon summoned the human kings, he had grown callous and cruel. It had been 2 years since his wedding day. He met with the kings, who told him that in his rage and absence, his kingdoms had fallen into disrepair. Tilly's family had used their wealth to move away from him and his power. The crops had gone fallow, and all around gray skies blanketed the horizon. Defeated, Killigan hung his head low. Doing so, he saw the bangle around his arm. The piece had never diminished. It had never grown too tight or too heavy. He had grown a strong attachment to it. The jewelry reminded him of its maker, and he asked the father of Dorian where she was. Some part of him hoped that she was still available, that he could find the woman who had loved him and given to him long before he had known what it was he needed. "She has married the great serpent of the East," her father responded. "Her wedding with him was just this spring. You were invited, but in your anguish, I do think you missed our call, O mighty Killigan." While his tone was apologetic, the king seemed very happy for his daughter. For Killigan, though, his kindness only made the pain worse, and he sent all the kings from his lands. At the end of the month, he burned the country and all the nations still within to the ground, demanding solitude and peace, never to be heard from again. That's the end. Old-time stories have some pretty sad endings. Whoa, that was rough, bud. I feel so bad for Killigan in this story, even if he did make some bad decisions. I do wonder what happened to Dorian, though. I hope the Serpent of the East is nice to her. Not that burning your whole country down is a healthy response to loneliness either. Honestly, I think this one is kind of a sad story. How about you guys? Did you like our story tonight? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Join me again next week and I'll tell you another. Until then, all eyes on you, sweetie.